Well, hello and welcome back to
Amen.
our series of interviews where we are discussing the habits of grace or spiritual disciplines, spiritual practices, those things we can incorporate in our lives to help us know God and draw near to God. My guest today is my good friend, Steve Wood. Steve, I'm so excited you're here.
Thank you, man. It's good to be here. I love you much, man. I always feel
Same,
that. Yeah.
same. So Steve was my youth pastor in high school. He's been a mentor to me for years. He's a dear friend and is the pastor of the River Church in Warner Robins, Georgia. And today we're going to talk about Sabbath. Steve, I know this has been a personal journey for you on the topic of Sabbath. I would love first, just so we're clear on what we're talking about, could you tell us what Sabbath is? And then we'll talk a little bit more about how we can practice it.
Sabbath instituted by God. The Hebrew word means rest, to stop, to cease. And the first example that we get from that is God. He did that himself on the seventh day. Genesis chapter 2 creates the world, stops. God of endless energy, God of endless power, God of endless knowledge stops, rests, pats himself on the back and says, good job. I did a good job. All right.
Right.
And then biblically kind of just tells us that we are to identify with him. If you're going to be a God follower, a Christ follower, then we need to identify with him in that Sabbath, and to stop, to slow down. And what that looks like for different people, I don't know.
Yeah.
Because you and me you and I are pastors. We work on Sunday, believe it or not. People think that's the only day of the week that we work, but that's not
Right.
the case. Okay.
Yeah, I occasionally work on a Tuesday, but yeah, mostly Sundays.
And so it's impossible for us to take Sunday and make it the Sabbath, which happened, in the Jewish community. The Sabbath was on the last day of the week, identifying with God the Father. In the Old Testament version of creation, that kind of thing.
Right.
But then with the resurrection changed everything, and Christ followers began to meet first thing on the first day of the week, and
Right.
that became kind of their Sabbath, if you will.
Why do you think this is so important? I mean, it is on the first page of the Bible, right? All the way back to creation. You just talked about it. Even, in the New Testament, we get all these stories of Jesus and the way that he interacts with people on the Sabbath. It's a lightning rod issue in the New Testament. But yet it's still something that we ignore in so many ways. So why, for somebody who's maybe never practiced the Sabbath, why is this discipline so important?
Well, I think that because we are God followers, Christ followers, Jesus followers, believers, we are to identify with God in every area, okay? Right. And if he stops his creative work on the seventh day, then we who share in that same creative work of the gospel, of redemption, of drawing people to the Father, even then we are to stop that work and do the same and rest. And I think that when we do that, when we come to put the brakes on work, when we put the brakes on effort, it in essence strips pride away, because we then realize that we have no mastery over anything in God's creation. We pause and go, wait a minute, this is God at work in and through us. And when we stop our work, pause long enough, then we are reminded that we are dependent on God's power in us and through us. And so if we never stop, we wind up doing everything. I won't say we, I say I. I wind up.
I'll give you permission to use me in the example as well.
Okay, so somewhere along the way, I just wind up doing everything in my own strength.
Right.
And
I think that's an important point.
It's a day of rest. It's a day of worship. It's a day of stopping and ceasing, and recognizing that we are not the creator.
Yeah, that's so good. I think I love the way you brought up just the pride of not being able to stop. that when we do observe the Sabbath, it really does show us something about ourselves, and also something about God, and how
Yeah.
dependent we actually are on Him. Well, maybe for someone who this is a new concept to, but they're interested, right? Like you're talking about rest and how important it is, how it helps us break down pride in our own hearts, how it helps us to be dependent on God. What are some maybe steps you would give to someone on how they could get started? What are some things to consider? What are some things they could do just to get started in observing the Sabbath?
I would make I would make a measure. You may not be able to have a day. I know if you're a mom, there is no rest. Okay. I
Right.
know if you're a single parent, every minute of every day is full. Somewhere along the way, you need to pause for an extended period of time. This is beyond Sabbath is beyond your normal quiet time. It's beyond the normal 30 minutes. It's 10 minutes. It's beyond, it's way more than your drive time. Okay. Of course,
Right.
I don't live in Atlanta like the rest of you, but at the same time, it's so many people say, well, I have my quiet time in my drive time. And I'm like, no, you're not. You're cussing at all the other drivers. Okay. That's what you're
Right.
doing. So, there has to be at some point a time where you say, I will not do anything, that I will stop and focus on the Father.
Yeah.
Now, that may be an hour and a half in a morning, a Saturday morning before anybody else
Hmm.
gets up. Um, I mean, I already said, you and I work on Sunday, so that's our Sabbath is shot.
Hmm.
Okay. But for me, my Sabbath is Friday. And I, you know, I, I'm, I'm, I, I have set aside that time, and I get on my motorcycle. I have my Bible and my journal, and I head off into the wild blue yonder, and I drive until I get on somebody's um, pecan orchard, and I'll pull up and I'll
Hmm.
park it, and I'll read Bible and smoke cigar and journal for 2.5 hours,
Right.
and I'll ride the hour and a half back home. And so that is an extended Sabbath for me.
Right.
It's a ceasing from normal work, normal
Yeah.
activity. And I don't know how much time we have here, but I don't think that you need to, it's not a ceasing. The Pharisees said you couldn't do any work, and they just cut everything out. Whack, whack,
Right.
whack. You couldn't heal anybody, okay, for crying
Right.
out loud. And so Jesus kind of frowned on that. But I would say that any activity that puts you in the presence of the Father
Mm.
is Sabbath.
Right.
Okay, so if you have a favorite worship list, a song list that you listen to,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that puts you, and you just want to sing, that's great. If gardening in the back, and tilling, and that is out of your normal routine, but it puts you in the presence of God, and like, God, I am with you in the garden at this moment. Whatever it might be that puts you in the presence of the Father is Sabbath.
Right. And that could be a lot of different activities or a
It
lot
could
of
be
different
anything.
things
That's
for a
exactly
lot of
right.
different people.
That's right. I mean,
But
you would say, well, hey, riding a motorcycle, that doesn't sound very ceasing. Well, you don't understand what happens to me whenever I get on the motorcycle.
right.
I
Right.
shut down. Okay.
Right.
I'm in my own little world.
Yeah.
Whatever it takes for you to be there, that's exactly where you need to be.
That's good. That's good. All right. We're in kind of a crazy time right now. We talked about it before we started recording, right? That where every day feels like a Saturday. There's blurred lines during this coronavirus crisis between work and home and family, and all of those things are kind of running together. So would there be anything maybe that you would suggest or us do now, right? Like how would we practice Sabbath in this sort of environment?
This is where this is the creativity of all of this. This is the flexibility of all of this, because we are living under the same roof with the same people, rubbing the same elbows day after day after day. and there's a tendency to, man, blisters. I'm tired of being with the same people all the time. That sounds horrible, but you understand where I'm coming from,
Yeah, I
right?
totally understand.
Please,
Yeah.
please, okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't mean that I don't love my family. Um, I think that there needs to be some grace and some expectations maybe communicated to the family, that I need some space and I need some time, and I will legitimately give you some space and you some time, and I will help you get there. You may corporately come together and do something as a family,
Mm-hmm.
reading scripture or whatever, but at the same time, I'm hesitant to prescribe anything other than creativity on your part,
Right.
because you can, like the Pharisees, get locked into legalism pretty quick,
Yeah.
if we're not careful in saying, well, it's got to look like this in this way, that kind of thing. So
Yeah. That's good. I think creativity, but you also in there said like it just requires some clear communication, and this time just with people around, people in your home, right? Just kind of creating some expectations and just talking it through. I think that's incredibly helpful, and I
sure.
love I love just the freedom in it, right? Like there is a lot of freedom for us to enjoy and participate in the Sabbath, just as long as we are ceasing, right? Stopping and getting that time of rest.
Stopping from whatever regular activity looks like,
Right.
okay? Because if we get, God knows that repetition you wind up being a slave to. And the whole idea of Sabbath was foreign to the Israelites when they came out of Egypt, because they had worked for 400 years every day of the week. There was no ceasing, no stopping. And so for um, this prescribed cessation, man, that's a big word, but the stopping of everything right here, that this was a huge gift that God gave, that they were like, what? We don't, what? We don't
Right.
have to work?
Right.
This is crazy.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage everyone to, with open hands, open arms, and just say, I receive this as a gift for what it is.
Right.
And that is to enjoy the presence of the Father, to be there, and to know him, and to hear him say, I love you,
Mhm.
and I'm proud of you, and I like you. That's what we're missing. We miss that so very often,
Yeah.
because we're running.
Yeah.
And God says, wait a minute, back up. Let's breathe a little bit.
Yeah. That's
Sorry.
good. No, man, that's good. That was fantastic, and I think you're right. I don't think we realize how poisonous this enslaving ourselves to productivity is, and how much it limits us from often hearing from God. Uh,
This
that's
Sabbath
powerful.
thing, yeah, this Sabbath thing has not come into my world, but for the last 10 years.
Right.
Okay. And it has been the spiritual discipline that has kind of taken me to, ooh, man, it's going to sound terrible, but it's a different level. Okay.
Hmm.
Does that make
Right.
sense?
Okay.
It's moved me just a step closer to God, that beyond fasting, beyond worship, beyond Bible reading and memorization, and all of the other spiritual disciplines that are disciplines because they're designed to put us in the presence of the Father. They're not disciplines in the fact that you must. They are simply guardrails to help us
Yeah.
find the presence of the Father. This Sabbath has gone a step beyond what I have experienced in my life,
Yeah.
beyond fasting, Bible reading, all of that other stuff.
That's great. Well, I think you and I could probably do this all day.
Yes, I could. I'm sorry.
I mean, I love sitting down and talking with you about stuff like this. Well, man, thanks for joining us. Thanks for encouraging us about the Sabbath. And I hope we get to do this again soon, very, very soon.
Yeah. I love you, Mercy Hill. I pray for you often. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Love you, Steve. Bye, bud.